if a facility, a building is not being used and you go in there and you say, I will use this building, and you use it for life and people are living there, and then there is a court battle. If I were to tell you what the real issues are in the United States, what's really harming people, the people that are really struggling, the things that are really bad. If I were to give you that list of like 100, and you think about the fact that there's 1 million people homeless in the country. There's so many that if they're not homeless, they're rent insecure. They could be evicted at any moment. There's people struggling in just so many ways. And what does USA Today say the problem is in this country? That squatters invade homes and refuse to leave. That is just a major issue, isn't it? That there's just so many squatters that aren't arrested. I mean, honestly, if I read this all already, I'll read a little bit to you. But if I read this all already, they act like people aren't arrested when they just go into a house and just live there. I think it should be allowed if no one's living in the house, because we have 16 million empty houses across this country. 16 million empty houses. They just sit there all across this country, and yet we have people rent insecure, people living with a dozen people in a house that's meant to hold 2. We have that all over the place, and there's 16 million empty homes. And this article is saying the real issue is that there are just so many squatters that and there's no way to kick them out. We just can't get them out. They just squat all the time. Now, in other countries, it is legal to squat in a facility that's not being used. And there is actual debate about, well, it's not, it wasn't being used. It wasn't being used for a year, which then entitles other people to live there. In the U.S., we don't really have that stuff. We don't have squatters' rights almost ever. Rarely are there areas with squatters' rights. So the idea that this is some epidemic. So this article says, in Texas, a homeowner says she was locked out of her house by a squatter who claimed to have a lease after moving to the state with her family. The woman previously had been evicted from 3 other homes. Okay, so this is furthermore, besides the fact that people like this generally get arrested, I'm not saying it's right, but they generally get arrested. They were kicked out of the house by police, by men with guns. But on top of that, this is a rare exception. There are not many people in this country right now who just go into a house, see the homeowner walk up and go, this is my place. And they just lock the doors and refuse to leave. And no police or anything will come and arrest the people living in the house that isn't theirs. Now, I would argue if the house isn't being used, they should be allowed to. However, this is very rare. And yet here is this article acting like, this happens all the time. They found like 3 examples. In Maryland, a woman returned from vacation to find 2 squatters in her bed. They were not only living in her house, but also sold $50,000 of her furniture. Again, very rare. Also, the fact that you have $50,000 of furniture. Wow. It's a pattern. And then USA Today continues. It's a pattern that is playing out in many cities across the United States. No, it's not. It's really not. It's also common in Europe, where squatting has become a political movement with support from the left. Okay, now, in Europe, there are some countries and some areas where there are squatters' rights. It is illegal if a facility, a building is not being used, and you go in there and you say, I will use this building, and you use it for life and people are living there, and then there is a court battle because it was not being used, people now using it. And if you think about it, there's a lot of logic to that. To the idea that an empty building could be used by humans that need a place to goddamn live. Like, there's a lot of logic to that. So you can have that debate, but USA Today is acting like, that's just all over America. No, there are places where people fight eviction, and I also support that, fighting eviction. But the number of people that can just go into a home, squat there, and have someone show up, say, I own this property, and no police would kick them out, very rare in the United States. Now, again, I'd argue If that person saying this is my property owns 15 houses and doesn't live in the one that they're living in, they probably should get to stay there. Then they go to the example of, and I kind of love this guy. They go to the example of Gramrit Hanspel, who lives in Long Island. He's 52 years old. He hasn't paid his mortgage in 25 years. I really love this guy. The mortgage was foreclosed because he didn't, for lack of payment, but the company now owns the home has struggled for decades to evict Hanspel, who continues to change lawyers and file lawsuits to delay proceedings. Now that's amazing. He's fighting the banks and he's winning. He's winning. Good for him. We need more people winning against the banks. Also, this is how desperate this article is to act like this is happening a lot in the United States. They call it a fairly big problem. They then show a photo of these seemingly squatters making a point with cardboard boxes on their heads. And so you think, okay, these are American professional squatters who are trying to squat with cardboard on their heads, and they're stealing homes. And if you're an average reader who doesn't know to look at these things, because this whole article is about the United States, except for that one sentence saying it's also a problem in Europe. So this is all about it being in the United States, Texas, Long Island, everywhere. This photo in tiny writing, if you look at it, is former residents of a squat who gathered in front of a court in Amsterdam, Netherlands in 2019. So they found a photo of protesters in the Netherlands at a courthouse who had boxes on their head to make a point that they shouldn't have to live in boxes. And yet this article is including a 4-year-old photo from the Netherlands to act like this is what's happening in the United States. Oh, God. Propaganda is the best, isn't it? Thank you, USA Today. And by the way, in case you're wondering, USA Today, I believe, is the most read newspaper in America because they give it away for free in every hotel and everywhere. And so, and it's unlike most city newspapers, it's throughout the United States. So I believe it probably is the most read newspaper in the United States. And I used to, when I was traveling more, I used to pick them up to just look at the propaganda and the bullshit. And it's a newspaper for children. It really is a newspaper for very simple-minded people. But amazingly, people believe this propaganda. The number of Americans who probably read this and go, oh my God, they're coming for our houses. They're coming. Squatters are going to bust in my door right now. And they're going to say, we live here now and nobody's going to help me. Yeah, not a thing.